So we have reached the last week of March Mindfulness. I cannot believe it. So first of all, I just want to start, whoever's watching this live, whoever's watching this down the road, thank you so much for supporting this project. And in fact, it's been so amazing that we have, what? What have we decided to do?
We are starting a new project called Moving Toward Mindful.
That's right.
So we have started an Instagram account at Moving Toward Mindful. We also have a website at Moving Toward Mindful. Yeah. And you want to tell them what it's going to be about?
Well, it's going to
can guess.
Yeah. It's going to be all about mindfulness, meditation, stress relief, anxiety, and so much more, because those are the things that I think have really been resonating with people, things that people really want to hear more about. So we're just going to devote a channel and all kinds of great stuff to it. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
And we're going to put it in situational situations.
Yeah.
So like divorce, childbirth, food allergies, parenting, work. So it's going to be like real world applications of mindfulness, which will be cool.
Right. So we hope you enjoy that. We hope you'll join us over there. So just follow us at Moving Toward Mindful right now. If you get a chance, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started. Let's get going on this food thing.
Yep.
Hi, Imogene. Yay. Okay. So is it just me, or does it feel like everybody has some kind of allergy or sensitivity? I mean, there's milk, there's eggs, there's nuts, there's wheat, there's soy, there's fish, there's sesame. It's like crazy. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by just the idea of food. Eat meat, don't eat meat, eat it raw, don't eat it raw, careful. This food was made on the intersection of a street where a peanut once lived, like that kind of thing. It's really madness. But the truth is that, tree nuts. Yeah, see, there you go. Believe it or not, 200,000 people visit the emergency room each year because of a food allergy.
Have you ever been one of those?
I was one of them, but before it was hip.
Before it was cool to go to the ER.
Before it was cool. Now look, this is a very serious topic, but I found that I have to laugh. So sometimes I'll joke around. This is a very stressful thing to live with. And for as stressful as it is with someone with a food allergy, caregivers to those with food allergies, I can't even imagine the pressure. So I'll joke around, but I'm not taking it lightly. This is truly a life and death thing. So I had, just to give you some backstory on me and where I'm coming from with the food allergy thing, I had my first allergic reaction when I was 4 years old. I remember sitting in front of an old TV. This was like 1986-ish. Old TV, playing one of those old Ataris. It was Pac-Man, and I was 4, so I couldn't really do much. But I remember sitting there with a little friend of mine, and our moms were in tow, talking and eating the Reese's Pieces. And I noticed...
Love those.
Good. I wouldn't know now.
I haven't eaten them in a while.
I noticed my mouth felt itchy. I mean, and that was the only way, I remember this vividly, that was the only way I knew how to describe it. So I told Mom, my mouth feels itchy, my tongue feels itchy. And I was very lucky. I had a mother that took me very seriously. Not everybody is so fortunate, but she did the only thing that she knew to do at the time, which actually worked, and that was to give me a glass of milk, which would have sent J.A. into a little bit of a tizzy because he's got lactose intolerance.
That's my big one.
But for me, I wasn't allergic to milk, so that worked. And I nursed a glass of milk. Mom took away the Reese's Pieces, and I drank the milk slowly, and I started to feel better. So I don't know if it was just the refocusing of my attention that made it better or the actual milk, but it worked. The second time was when my father ate some peanuts earlier in the night, washed his hands at least twice, handed me my toothbrush, okay? And I had full-blown anaphylactic reaction. So lucky for me, at that point, I was diagnosed with anaphylaxis. And remember, this was in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s. So there wasn't a ton of diagnostics to test me to see exactly what was going on. It was basically like they knew what anaphylaxis was. Keep her away from nuts. So the carnival began because we couldn't pinpoint exactly what my allergens were. My poor parents and the stress they must have endured, they eliminated pretty much everything that could possibly be an issue. So
right.
I didn't eat chocolate. I ate chocolate for the first time really when I was 28. So I went without eating chocolate because mom noticed that a lot of the fancy chocolates have nut oils in them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the candy had nuts in it. So she just figured it was easier to keep me away from all of it. And quite frankly, I would have done the same thing at the time. So as with most food allergic kids, I fully understood the magnitude of what could happen if I ate the wrong thing. And anybody who's had any sort of anaphylaxis before, it is like your whole world. It is one of the scariest things I can ever imagine happening. And that triggered something else, which is what I'll tell you about in a minute. I grew up really fast. So this other thing I was going to tell you about in a minute, I used to give myself psychosomatic reactions. I don't know if any of you that are watching have ever experienced that. When you believe that you just ate something that can hurt you, whether or not you actually did is in question. I've actually induced anaphylaxis where I took Benadryl and the whole thing, no EpiPen or emergency room, but I was so convinced that I was having a reaction that I actually had a reaction.
Right. It's like how we can give ourselves like a panic attack by just thinking about panic.
That's
So,
right.
yes,
Our mind is
yep.
extremely powerful, which is why we're talking about this in relationship to mindfulness. And we'll get to that in a minute. Just to give you a little bit more of what this did to my head and how I put a few things together recently, it gave me social anxiety. I don't know if you ever had to stop a first kiss because the person you were about to kiss had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch. And yes, you have to actually ask to know that. And that was just devastating. So I had social anxiety around dating. I had social anxiety around parties because, you know, there was always like the little thing of nuts on the table. And I knew the second I walked in a room who was eating them, where they were going. It was like
Nut
a crazy. It was. And I wish I was a savant in other ways, not that one, but that's what I got. Work. I used to have severe anxiety starting a new job and even just going to work, not because of the work, but because I was afraid someone would want to take me out to lunch. And it terrified me to go and eat in a restaurant. I felt like I could actually die. So yeah, there's that. Now, that's also manifested, and I've realized a few of these things recently with my mindfulness practices. I am obsessed with food, and I'm using the present tense because these aren't things that I've gotten over. These are things that I am dealing with right now and why we're talking about them right now. I am obsessed with food. I'm obsessed with clean eating. I am constantly labeling food as good and bad in my head.
And sometimes out loud.
A lot of the times out loud. He's being kind. When we had our daughter and she experienced what they call colic, which nobody really knows what colic is, my first initial instinct was to stop eating everything for me because I was breastfeeding her. Now that may be the right thing to do, but the fact is, like, immediately I assumed that it was the food that was hurting her. So I stopped eating everything. And then when she had digestive upset again, when she got a little older, that was the first thing I did, is restrict her food. And it was my go-to. So yes, a doctor may have told us to do the same thing, keep a food journal, restrict certain things, because the fact is, like, 1 in every 13 kids has a food allergy these days. That's like 2 kids a classroom. So it's out there. But the fact is, that was my first instinct was, oh my gosh, food is what's hurting us. I think about food all the time. What I just ate. Was I bloated? Sometimes I'll even like feel like, am I bloated? Oh, I don't want to eat that again. It's bad. I'm bloated. Tomorrow I'm going to eat this way. I weighed myself twice a day, literally until 2 weeks ago. I'm starting to study intuitive eating, and it just occurred to me like the scale is giving me something else to add to this whole thing. So I got rid of the scale, and I have to say I've felt the best in the last 2 weeks that I felt in a really long time. So the bottom line is, the whole point of this is, I have come to understand through mindful awareness that my allergies made me feel controlled, restricted, and afraid. Food ran my life from the time I was 4 years old. Somehow along the way, my wires got a little crossed. I now obsess over controlling food. So it's like, oh, Now the ball's in my court. I'm going to control you. And I was doing this all completely unconsciously, by the way. But it's still the food. My restrictions, they seem like they're my choice, but they aren't my choice. Food is still controlling me, but I was on autopilot is the whole point here. I was on autopilot with this whole food controlling thing, and mindfulness snapped me out of it. And literally this happened during March Mindfulness, okay? When we are making an extra effort to be aware of our emotions, be aware of what we're thinking and what we're feeling without judgment, just awareness. And one day, I feel like I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, I have an eating problem. And I traced it back. And over days and over a few weeks, it was like, this must come from an ingrained sense that I've had since I was 4, when food could literally kill me.
Right.
So here are some things that I do, because the whole point of sharing this is to share how, if you're somebody who's dealing with it, even if you don't have food allergies, even if you're just dealing with a relationship with food that may be similar. I mean, look, between dieting out there and all the messaging we get, it's hard not to be completely overwhelmed with all the foods that are processed, all the documentaries telling you eat this, don't eat that, this thing. I mean, it's good to be conscious of your food, but it's not good to be controlled by your food. So here's the whole point. These are things that I do. And if you're watching this, if you have food allergies that are crippling, if you know somebody, if you're a caregiver to people with food allergies, these are all things you can practice. So the first thing is grounding. And we've talked about this in our previous March Mindfulness episodes. So grounding, breathing. When I think about food now, when I worry about something I am going to eat, or for someone like me with anaphylaxis, when I'm going to eat something, when I've already eaten something and I think, oh no, I just ate something I might die from, which is rarely the case because I'm so careful. I picture giant magnets attached to my feet and the earth pulling me down, and those negative feelings going into the earth from my body. I focus on my breath, the ins and the outs, and I try to slow it down, because usually it's an anxiety attack is really what it is, right, JA? I mean, that's what it feels like.
Yes. Sometimes when you describe this,
yeah.
I mean, like same with my lactose intolerance. If I had felt like I had eaten something that may have milk in it, lactose intolerance, for those of you who don't know, can lead to some rather embarrassing situations. And I would get that social anxiety. It would trigger anxiety. It does it. Just like that. So I think you're right.
So slowing it down, I focus on my breath, and I repeat the words, I am breathing, I am fine. I am breathing, I am fine. I'm trying to tune into my body. That's what this does. Instead of your mind going, oh, you're going to die. Oh, you just ate something, because shush. It allows me to slow that down and focus on my body and truly tune into what's happening.
Right.
So the first thing is stay calm, and that's the grounding technique.
Ground yourself.
The next thing I do is remember how I told you guys my mom gave me that cup of milk. To this day, I remember that. And I remember sipping the milk, and I remember feeling better. And I think it was because largely, possibly a placebo. There may be some scientific evidence that helps, but I don't know that that's true. But my mind, instead of focusing on the tickliness of my tongue, I focused on the milk, sipping the milk, feeling how cold it was. It was just a calming thing to do. So I also do this next thing when I get nervous, and that is notice the things around me. Name the things that I can see, because then it brings me back into this moment, into this earth, instead of taking me who knows where in my mind. What can I feel? Am I sitting in a chair? Maybe I need to get up. Maybe I need to feel the floor under my feet and focus on that. So anything that brings me back to my body, because that's where we need to make sure that everything's okay. Then if something is happening and there is an allergic reaction taking place, you can respond appropriately and take the action you need. Sometimes if it's a Benadryl, I take a Benadryl. I carry an EpiPen with me all the time. I prefer the emergency room personally. Oh, ranch dressing. There's weird things out there.
That's right.
But staying calm is important.
I was eating, I don't know if any of you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, since I had a lactose intolerance, right? We were always looking for alternatives. There was a type of ice cream called tofuti, right? It's made of tofu. Well, to go along with what Melissa's saying, my mom took me to get this because this was good for me. This was something I could do. And I ate it, and I got this feeling like I had broken glass in my throat.
Yeah.
And I didn't associate the two the first time I had it. Didn't even make that connection.
Yeah.
Ate it again, and it was even stronger.
Yeah.
And for 30 years, I wouldn't touch tofu. I wouldn't touch like that kind. So that's how much of a hold it took, because I wasn't, I never ground, when I thought about it, I would get really nervous about it. I never grounded myself and stayed within logic. And it was these grounding techniques like 3-2-1 and whatever, they're very important because they remind us that we exist first.
Right.
Then we can start to tune into the potential sensations.
Right, right. And that kind of leads me to my next point, which is that the body is smart, okay? This last point that I want to make is for caregivers worried about their kids, because my heart goes out to you zillions and trillions of times. It's one thing to be living it. It's another thing to feel like you need to be the one to protect that person from it because it's so scary.
Right.
So here's my message. First of all, we do the best we can, okay? We be as careful as we can with what foods we give our kids and who we leave them with, okay? So we make it clear we have to be the advocates for ourselves and our family. That's just the way it goes. But we do the best we can. Trust that their bodies will tell them if something is wrong, and then they will tell us that something is wrong. They will tell you that something is wrong. Can you stop that for 1 second, please? Thank you, sweetheart. Sorry. Be prepared. So have Benadryl, have an EpiPen on you if that's what needs to happen. Trust that you are prepared. If they eat something they can't tolerate, their body tells them something is wrong, they tell you, then you're prepared to act, okay? That's the best you can do.
That's the best.
That's the best you can do. And then here's something else that might bring you and the person you're caring for a little bit of peace. Practice mindful eating with them. So prepare food with them. Molly, sweetheart, can you be quiet for just 1 second? Thank you. Okay. Practice mindful eating. She's talking on the phone. On her toy phone. Okay. So prepare food that they can eat with them. It's a great joy to take with them. Teach them to chew carefully. Teach them to savor the taste and feelings that each food produces in their mouth. This works on multiple levels, right? First of all, it enhances their enjoyment of food, maybe your enjoyment of food. It's better for digestion. But this is also how they can help protect themselves. If they know how their body responds to certain food, they'll be much faster and more efficient in identifying when something isn't being well tolerated, okay? I can't emphasize that enough. Help them flex their intuitive eating muscle so that they trust their bodies and rely on their bodies instead of on their heads to tell them when something is wrong. Because in my experience, my head can't always be trusted. I mentioned earlier that I have given myself psychosomatic reactions to food. And that is not because I've eaten an allergen. In fact, I'm almost certain that I didn't. But because I believed that I had, maybe something tasted a little different, maybe the texture was a little different, I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this is. Did I really ask the server enough? And it was because I didn't trust in my intuition. Maybe if I had been a little more in tune, I would have maybe not eaten it because I would have noticed before I put it in my mouth that something wasn't quite right. Maybe when I put a little bit in my mouth, you can notice it at that moment that it's not quite right. Instead of wolfing down an entire plate of something and then saying, ooh, uh-oh. I once stood in the kitchen and I ate this, it was an Entenmann's, which was dangerous to begin with. But
the raspberry coffee cake?
No, it was the donut holes.
Oh.
I remember the coffee cake because I could eat the light one for whatever reason, not the full fat one. Another area where I probably started with some of this stuff. I was eating the donut holes, and I was eating them, and I was eating them, and I was eating them. And then I decided, oh, I'm gonna look at the ingredients after I'd eaten like half of the thing. Not smart, right? Because I looked at the ingredients and it says contains filberts. Okay, filberts are a nut. I actually didn't know that at the time. I was probably in middle school, freaked out, worked myself up, pretty sure I had to take Benadryl. I don't think it was ever a true reaction, but there you go.
Well, now we have somebody talk about MSG. My brother, we were out at a Chinese restaurant one night many years ago, probably in the very early 80s, and he started to get jaw pain, very bad jaw pain. So that it just came out of nowhere. We weren't.
That could be a sign of anaphylaxis.
And so, but then whenever we would go out for Chinese food, we would start that script. Please make sure the food doesn't have MSG. And then sometimes you train yourself to associate Chinese food with MSG, with jaw pain. And so we would go out and he would start to get paranoid about, whether or not. So these things just come out of nowhere. So MSG has been part of my lineage with this as well.
Yeah. And we're not doctors. So
we're not doctors.
We can't speak to what happens. I mean, obviously I'm 38, by the way. So I was born in 82. So I've lived a good long time with this stuff, and I studied an awful lot about it, but we're not doctors. So there's so much out there now that are causing trouble for people. And that's why it really was important for us to round out this March mindfulness with this topic. And this is something that if you guys out there are interested in, I'm going to be, chronicling some of my journey here, because as I said, it's an active journey. Because I think that mindfulness could really help. We're raising a generation of kids with food allergies. I mean, 2 in every classroom. So if we can get ahead of it by starting some of these mindfulness techniques early, and yes, they need to protect themselves and be advocates for themselves. You're raising, or you're going to be raising, if they're babies, very strong individuals. So arm them with this exercises for mindfulness. Maybe it will help them just add some more value to their lives, enhance their quality of life a little bit more.
That's right. And we are, like we said before, we are starting up at Moving Toward Mindful. And we're going to be continuing these discussions. We're probably going to be doing this. This has been very well received, and we appreciate all the support. We're going to keep doing this on Mondays over at Moving Toward Mindful. And we're going to have the shows up on movingtowardmindful.com, because this is all just really important. And I just want to say to everybody, we rounded out these last 5 weeks. It's been wonderful. And just remember, mindfulness is purposefully setting your intention, purposefully setting your focus in the moment, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your body sensations, without judgment. And so as we come to the end of at least March with this, keep that in mind. And remember, you don't need to have all this background about mindfulness. You just need to set the intention to pay attention. And I think so much of that food, meals is the 5 senses, and involve them all. When you eat, whether or not you have an allergy or know someone with an allergy, eat consciously, eat with intention, focus on the food, think about where the food came from, how it makes you feel. It's one of the easiest ways during the day to practice mindfulness. And we're going to keep on this at Moving Toward Mindful. That's
right. Thank you so much, everybody. And if there are any questions, anybody that's watching this live or later, DM me if you're somebody who's dealing with food allergies and you want to talk more about this, or if you're a caregiver to somebody with allergies. I'm more than delighted to share more of my experiences and how I'm using mindfulness to help me overcome a lot of these issues that I'm dealing with today.
Yeah, and if you go to japlosker.com, there's a free mindfulness quick start guide there that Melissa and I developed, and it can help you get started with some of this. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, and we're going to see you next Monday.
We'll see you next Monday, same time, right? We're going to do
the same time at Moving Toward Mindful.
Yep, okay.
So, all right.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.